Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, Sadrine. It's lovely to have you all here today. I'm a white woman in my mid-40s with dark brown hair and dark eyes. I'm wearing a pair of jeans and a green top and a blue vest. I'm holding pieces of paper and a notebook. As a preface, I would like to read the beginning and end from a poem by Mary Oliver called Wild Geese, and hopefully it will make sense why I chose this poem and how it relates to what Sadrine was talking about and what I'm going to talk about. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls you to it like the wind, like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. I joined the project both as an academic researcher and a creative practitioner, with the aim to support Sadrine and the project participants in the use of a wearable technology for sound and movement interaction, as well as with the aim to study how Sadrine and the project participants used and experienced the technology. On my wrist, I'm wearing a square-shaped object, a bit bigger than a matchbox. Inside this square, there is a sensor and a rechargeable battery. The sensor is connected via Bluetooth to a laptop, sometimes, and is sending to the laptop data in real time, sometimes, about my motion, specifically the tilt, rotation, and spin of the part of the body that is holding the sensor. These data are processed through a custom-made software and become translated into sound in real time. The software also includes a visual interface that I can see on a computer screen, and through this interface I can choose the specific sound I want to work with each time. There is a variety of sounds I can choose from. You heard some of them already, including the sound of acoustic instruments. Sadrine, if we can have the harp up, please. Compositions of texture-based sounds, as well as field recordings. This is echome, a wearable technology for sound and movement interaction that can be used in real-life environments and requires no technical expertise or setup, but a lot of nerve, as you witnessed. I would like to spend the next 20 minutes or so talking about the role that the particular technology has had in this project and how it encompasses and facilitates the company's mission, which, as Sadrine was just telling us, is to champion inclusivity, connection, and expression, specifically in relation to the experience of visual impairment and blindness. Sadrine and I met in 2021 when Sadrine visited Inside Yellow Sound, an installation I created with a group of artists and academics at the University of Leeds. The installation was based on a stage composition developed by painter Vasily Kandinsky in 1909 and explored how the use of echome could both foreground the synesthetic quality that is at the heart of Kandinsky's work, as well as render the composition accessible to people with visual impairment or blindness. As you already heard, Sadrine had already done some work on developing a dance approach for participants with visual impairment, and she also enjoyed the installation, so we both became interested in working together. The summer of that year, Sadrine, dancer Sophia Older, and I worked together on the development of a pedagogy for the use of echome in dance practice. Some of the questions we asked were: how can echome enable creative expression as well as development of material for performance? What kind of skills can the creative use of echome foster? how do these skills compare with existing skills in dance and movement training? How can the insights we gain in the studio be communicated to other practitioners? At the heart of these sessions was the idea that when we're working with this technology, the perception and making of sound is closely intertwined with the perception and making of movement. I use the word kinesonic to capture this close intertwining. Kinesonic is a composite word from the words kinesthetic and sonic, and aims to name an embodied experience whereby acts of sounding and listening are informed by kinesthetic awareness, and acts of moving are shaped by auditory perception and listening. These sessions resulted in the creation of 9 videos called Kinesonic Embodiment, which you can find on the echome website, and offer a range of practical activities on what a group of practitioners can do in the studio and how they can progress from simple to more complex tasks. These sessions offered for the basis for the creative approach that Sandrine and I began using together with the Leeds-based group of this project, as well as separately from each other. So what I would like to do with this talk is bring attention to 2 key points where the mission of Unbound meets the principles that lead the development of echome. One is accessibility, and the other one is the role of vision in dance. So I will start with accessibility. One of the principles that both Sandrine and I shared were the conviction that accessibility is not a set of adjustments that become retrofitted to a performance or a workshop once the performance or workshop are ready to go. Rather, accessibility is the ground on which any collaboration or encounter begins. Both Sandrine and I, therefore, begin with the assumption that each person, whether this is an audience member, a workshop participant, or a collaborator, will bring to a performance or creative process their unique experience of what Tobin Siebers calls complex embodiment. The needs, preferences, trainings, habits, and social inscriptions that constitute and shape a person's engagement with the world and with an artwork. This is not to erase the very real biological markers of impairment and the very real social inequalities of disability. This is not to say that because we're all different, difference does not matter. It does. It is rather a way of keeping in mind that each person is embodied, and that embodied experience is contextual, multidimensional, and processual. Disability is not something fixed, both because the impairment that relates to the disability may be different over time, as well as because embodied experience by default is contingent upon many factors: the weather, the satisfaction of basic needs, connection with others, to name just a few. Within a professional dance environment, this idea of complex embodiment is also a way of acknowledging that different forms of embodiment feature different kinds of skills, competencies, and value systems. Within any creative process, therefore, it becomes important, as Sandrine already said, to be transparent about and, if possible, share the values that guide each person's process and decision-making. Although the ethos I'm describing is commonly shared, there is still a divide between so-called professional dance practice and so-called community practice. The divide is not simply about who gets to participate and under what terms, but also what as a society we consider to be dance. What dance should look like? When dance is good? What kind of bodies and persons can dance? It would be fair to say that Sandrine and I share a deep suspicion of this divide, and as you may know already, Sandrine's work also includes a long and very successful involvement with professional dance practice. And I asked her once why she decided to leave this world, and she told me that she got bored. So we are both suspicious, and maybe we're bored as well of this divide, and especially the way it becomes mobilized towards the maintenance of oppressive hierarchies. So you might have heard about dance degrees and dance departments closing down across the country. Unfortunately, the one offered by Leeds Beckett is also being discontinued. And just to give you a recent example of what I have in mind, on the 4th of April, the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, and I quote from The Guardian, told the Office for Students to freeze grants intended to meet the extra costs of offering music, drama, fashion, and other arts courses for undergraduates, and for it to cut grants for postgraduate teaching in those subjects. Okay? So any public investment towards creative arts and performing arts courses is being discontinued. I mean, that's nothing new, but listen to this bit. I'm quoting. However, funding for what Keegan called our world-leading small and specialist providers, such as the Royal Colleges of Music, would be protected through an additional grant. Okay? So the way I read this, maybe you have different, you see it differently, but the way I read this is that this is a propagation of a very elitist point of view, where the kind of dance and the kind of music that we can put on big stages and export abroad is the kind of thing we support, whereas any other form of creative expression for anyone else who does not aspire to this level is not worth public investment. Although watching the movement of strong, athletic, able bodies is a source of pleasure and aspiration, expression and the potential of an expressive act to move others is not limited to youth or even professional training. In fact, one could argue that if performing arts only show the bodies of the professionally trained, we miss a very powerful way of understanding how everyone else experiences the world. By prioritizing the trained dancer, who is often white, usually under 35 years old and nearly always able-bodied, we only see a very specific part of the population, and as a result, we limit the possibility that the performing arts offer us for learning about and understanding each other. What I find exciting is that within professional dance training, there is a recognition of the need to foster the students' ability to connect with others. In her introduction to the volume Ethical Agility, Noyal Colleen explains, I quote, "The etymological root of technique, which is techni, refers to the craft of doing things well. To explore the ethical aspect of techniques in dance is to ask if dancing well can be considered an action in the service of the good, or, in other words, what are the techniques that develop the training of dance as an ethical action?" The work of Unbound Dance Theatre, therefore, is exciting not because a group of professional dancers is working with people who do not have a professional dance background. What is interesting here is that the embodied experience of both of these groups matters and is considered a valid mode of expression. From my perspective, therefore, as an academic researcher, I see Unbound Dance Theatre as a powerful way to exemplify the way dance practice can cut across externally imposed hierarchies and offer a model for a truly inclusive, ethically oriented way of working. We are indeed. The use of echome within this project is of particular interest. As I've already implied, sound and movement interaction is an evolving practice, which at the moment has no fixed vocabulary and quality benchmarks. And one of the things Sandrine and I are doing is to develop the skills and qualities that make up good practice. Therefore, when we enter the space of this project, it is with an attitude of curiosity, an openness to trial and error, and an acute attention to what is happening in the moment, rather than a preconceived idea of how a moment should look or sound like, because we don't know. Accessibility, therefore, is not only about ensuring access, it is also about starting from the assumption that knowledge, skill, beauty may manifest in ways we're not taught to expect or recognize. The ability to be open to these moments, to allow these moments to access us, requires constant work, and if you want, This is the work we have committed to be doing together. And this brings me to the second point, which is the question of the sensory modalities involved in dancing and performing dance. Dance involves the motion of the body in space and time, but for reasons I won't go in right now, it has been reduced to a visual spectacle. In a recent article that explores accessibility of dance for non-sighted audiences, Blessing and Zimmerman explain, I quote, "Dance is brought on stage in order to be watched, and even though this visual experience of moving bodies can elicit a variety of multimodal perceptions, it is always conceptualized to be visual in the first place." But does this mean that dance as an art form and aesthetic experience is by definition only accessible to a sighted audience? If dance is conceptualized foremost through acts of seeing, visual impairment and blindness are by default a problem. This is often addressed by recruiting the other senses as a compensatory mechanism. For example, some of the techniques for making dance accessible to blind and visually impaired audiences includes audio description and touch doors. Sound and movement interaction technologies have also been used, both in dance training and performance, to translate movement into sound. These techniques can be useful, and there has been very rich professional practice going into developing them. However, investing in these techniques only may stop us from asking groundbreaking questions. Why is dance so closely related to vision? Is vision an essential aspect of dance? Can we think and practice dance beyond vision? The second thing that I find very exciting is that Unbound Dance Theatre is taking up these questions and, in fact, as you heard before, sets out to break free from the confines of visual norms. So Sadrine already explained the profound impact that her work with blind and visually impaired people had on the practice. So really, the purpose of this company becomes to redefine dance. I would like to think that the use of echome in this project can serve this wider aim. As I explained already, the activities with echome strive to foster a form of kinesonic embodiment, a form of sensory experience where dance and music, sound and movement are in reciprocal relationship, constantly informing one another. The wider aim is to provide a framework for creative exploration which moves beyond the existing demarcation of the senses in the 5 ones we know from the Western canon: sound, vision, touch, smell, and taste. Thank you. Interestingly, anthropologist David House points out, I quote, that which senses are counted and what counts as a sense are not physiological universals, but shaped by culture. House also argues that within Western culture, the separation of the senses in discrete sensory streams is ideologically and politically connected with the separation of people in individuals. He argues that an ideology of sensory exclusivity is symptomatic of a society that is centered on the autonomous individual rather than the relations between individuals. So what House and other anthropologists and choreomusicologists talk about, especially when they study the work of non-Western cultures, the performing traditions of non-Western cultures, is that the way the sensory organism is structured, and the way it is structured in the West is according to the 5 senses, actually maps to social structures. And in those societies where senses are understood to be a lot more synesthetic and the experience is considered a lot more transsensorial, there is actually a lot more relationships of kinship, and an individual, a person, is understood in terms of their relationship to others rather than as an autonomous person. And what we've got in the West is a discrete separation of those 5 senses, and accordingly, on a social level, we have a very discrete separation of individuals, of persons in individuals. A technology and pedagogy for sound and movement interaction can therefore offer the opportunity for experiencing and thinking about sensory perception in new ways. We might not yet have a language to fully account for this experience, but through creative work, such as the one that happens within this company and in this very studio, we can begin to gain an understanding of its contour. Most importantly, working in this way can turn perceptions of sound, gravity, locomotion, and breath to become places where we can meet each other through what Mary Oliver calls the soft animal of our body. Thank you.
So if you, if you have any question for Maria, please feel free to ask them. I'm coming.
Thank you. I wondered, and it might be beyond the scope of the kind of current research project, but whether you'd explored translating movement into other senses as well, into touch or smell or taste, or mixtures of the above, or thus far we just worked with sound?
Thank you. A tiny bit. There is an engineer in University of Leeds where I work, where he's very interested in developing haptics, both as a creative and as an assistive technology, and he's using echome because echome is already set up in this way. And what he does is he takes the sound and translates it into vibration. So the idea is that as somebody moves, the movement via this system translates into vibration, which can be felt by the person who moves or by someone else. Thank you.
You spoke about kinship within societies less sensory. Is there anything in your research thus far that has kind of progressed into what we can do as individuals in a Western society to kind of develop that kinship more?
Yeah, thank you. That is the question, really, isn't it? So just to clarify, the argument, if you want, or what the research shows, is that in societies, it's not a question of how much sensory input or perception is there. It's how that becomes classified within a system. So, for example, in other forms of dance, there is no separation between dance music. It's considered one thing because it's transsensorial. So in terms of what's happening here, I think there is a lot we can do. I think the kind of work that happens within this project is a very good example. I think also working outdoors, and there is quite a lot of work within both dance and somatic practitioners who are working outdoors. And again, as Adrien mentions, I think dance practice and movement practices, we have such a rich toolkit. We have such a big bag of tools to enable connections between people and connections between human and non-human others. So I think it's just about, and especially with the onslaught on dance courses in academia and the kind of rhetoric we see around that, I think it's absolutely central that people come together, that we know each other, that we practice together, that our sector is healthy and vibrant, and there are so many ways in which this can happen.
Any other question? No more questions? Do we have any question online?
There is one.
Sorry. You touched on it at the end about the collaboration, really, and it was really asking how do other practitioners that aren't maybe in the dance world kind of can support that collaboration? Because I know Helen's talking a little bit later on about taking a trauma-informed approach. So how does that support? Because obviously it's quite soul-destroying listening to when you were talking about the funding being cut, and it's very short-sighted of the government that they can't see how that then is actually not being inclusive and pushing sort of other people out of that arena, so to speak. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear more about where the company is going regarding collaboration.
With non-dancers, you mean, or people from other professional backgrounds?
Yeah, I suppose you'll probably see a route through with other dancers, but somebody like myself isn't within the dance world. But obviously there's an arena then to kind of work collaboratively to look at how you can showcase this and almost like challenge then people's thinking about being inclusive. Because it's quite a statement that you made before about the funding, and when you put it like that, it's like, that is wrong on every level. Sorry, just felt like a voice.
Well, I don't know if Sadrine, if you've got ideas specifically about what you're thinking about the company, but I think in broader terms, I think first of all is just, and this is like, again, one thing that we can do for each other is this idea that we're all bodies. Humans can't exist without a body. You know, you can't leave your body at home. And it's through our embodied experiences where we can open up and engage with one another on a much more humane level. And I think this is something the world needs right now. So yes, there is something about making those practices as healthy and as powerful as possible and sharing them and kind of talking to the powers about their importance. But then it's also, the way I experience it is very much like something like a practice each individual can do every day, because my experience has been that it is so easy to become very disembodied and very much in one's head and very, very much overwhelmed by information, by stress, all kinds of things that are going on. And there is something about being able to go back to this and from this open up to other people. And I think that's the daily practice. But maybe, yeah, on a kind of a
I mean, that's
policy.
such a big question. I'm going to feedback if I go there. I think just what you say, we interact with the world through movement. So technically, we are constantly dancing. And I think it's making way into consciousness that dance is not this high ground, hierarchical things that you get to watch if you've been kind of groomed into it. It's something that can be experienced by anyone, and it's for anyone because we live it every day. I know I'm not answering the question, but I think it's making a point that movement and dance are part of the everyday life, and it's so beneficial. So I think you were talking about collaboration. I think collaboration with the health sector is a very strong angle to go towards because of all the benefits that you can have with dance. It's also making sure that this kind of work and inclusive work is not on the outskirts of the dance industry, but it's in the heart of the dance industry, and it's taught in college and higher education, and students are aware that it's one part of, it's not just one little part, it should be encompassing the whole of dance practice, because the dance world really needs more of this, because there's a lot of toxicity, there's a lot of non-consent practice, there's a lot of exclusivity, and I think if we bring more inclusivity in dance industry as a whole, we will make our point on how it is useful for society.
It's what we're doing today, so
I'm being called.
We have a question online from Rebecca, who asks, Maria, where could we find any reading material from you, please?
Oh, I can put the website on the echome website, a link to the echome website on. Can we put it on YouTube?
So the link, we might be able to put it on YouTube. sorry, we might be able to put on YouTube. And also, you have, if you have signed up to the Eventbrite event, there is a link with the symposium with all the information about all the guests, their websites, the information about the company. So if you just go on the Eventbrite page, for my live audience, there is QR codes a little bit scattered everywhere. You can scan them and you have access to all the guest information, company information, feedback form, donation page if you want to support the work that we're doing, and you can find everything, future performances, future workshop, everything is there. I think that answered the question. I think we're going to take a little break. There's refreshments coming up, so everybody can just get themselves water, tea, coffee, biscuits. It's just on the outside. There is an accessible toilet just on the right as you leave the room. There is a lift just after that if you need to go on the other accessible toilet that are below. If you go straight from that door, there is stairs going down, so please be careful. We'll have someone over there, but just so everybody's aware, there are stairs going down if you walk straight from the door. I think I said everything. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maria.